Well, hello you. I'm glad that you made it by today. It is Friday, and wow, it's been a couple of weeks. I might let you in on some of the things that have been happening in the background at the end of the video. So essentially, here's today's video. We're going to be talking about Ryk Brown, the Rings of Haven. On the Rings of Haven, it opens up just shortly after they make it to the new area that they're trying to figure out where they're at, but their ship is incredibly damaged and there's all kinds of things that are happening inside of the ship. The captain has passed on and left our main character, Nathan. He's got one really bad situation on his hands. So essentially, their ship is damaged, the captain has passed away, he got held to the honor of becoming the captain himself, and now that they're in this new place, they've heard tell that there's this area that they can go to because of some of the people they rescued in the fight that they just happened to show up in the last book. So they go to this place, the Rings of Haven, which is kind of like a mining cluster. They meet an individual by the name of Tobin, which he seems shady from the get-go. I think in one of the first scenes, whenever he's getting ready to get them onto his ship, the security personnel finds a bunch of guns behind his cloak and just lose their minds, of course, because the captain would be in danger. But anyway, there's also a rumor of this thing, or this idea, this rebellion, and then the bigger part of this huge empire, because this empire kind of broke tradition. There hadn't been any reason for people to get weapons or anything like that since they had departed the earth for the digital plague. But essentially, humanity was like really knocked in the head, and we find out more about this because of some of the backstory that happens in this book and in the next one, I believe. You may have already heard of some of these sorts of things, like there's these data arcs that are spread out. So people have actually sent little probes and whatnot already to this day out in space that has a lot of our technological prowess stored within them, so that if something happens that we can get them. Here's the better question. If we get reset to ground zero, how would we get those back? But no, there's seriously, there's other things like that as well, like DNA banks that have been set up in really remote areas where things like germs and plagues would be very less likely to get to. And that was one of the ways that humanity figured out that, hey, we were a space-faring race and we did have this ability. We're just out of the Stone Age, kind of, again, and wow, okay, let's do this. Let's find out what happened. The long of it all is they end up where they're at because of all those events happening. Let's talk real quick about some of the things that are happening with the differences of humanity, because we've been separated from each other for quite some time. Humans on Earth, we have our standard technological ways of thinking and doing things, but the places out in space, they've regressed in some degrees. Whenever it comes to particular things, they've advanced in technology, and so that is a neat thing to see. Now that their tech is able to do things that we couldn't dream of or think of, it's just that they've had other needs than we have, and they've progressed to progress in a lot of things where we tend to be more pragmatic and stubborn. Because of those differences, there's a stopgap in between their technology and the technology around them. Like some ships have auto-docking mechanisms, whereas ours, you do it by hand. There's also other instances where we got ahead of them with the jump drive technology that went haywire because it was used whenever something was exploding. Typical sci-fi trope. That's kind of what gives us our story, because they're so far away from home. They're fighting to get themselves where they're not fighting and to get back to Earth so that this oncoming invasion doesn't wipe out humanity. So that's what they're trying to accomplish. Now, throughout the Rings of Haven, there's a couple other things that are kind of interesting that mentioned backstory where it comes to this person or idea or thing of the rebellion versus the Imperial slime. But towards the ends of that, we start to move into the next book where it's going to go, what it's going to be about. And so that was an interesting tie-in to the next book instead of just being an abrupt. Now, the narrations of this book. Jeffrey Kafer does a really good job throughout this book whenever it comes to the excitement levels and whenever it comes to the dialogue exchanges back and forth. It was a very pleasant experience to have that pumped into my ear holes, as it were. There's probably better ways of saying that, but anyway. Long of it all is, I enjoyed the book. It is a serial type of a thing. We have been hinting that we're going to be covering one of the next ones forever. Made the video, although I'm pretty sure I've made the video. So that brings me into the second part of the video, so don't go clicking off. We're not actually done with anything yet. So here's what's been happening. Yes, I know that in a few videos I've mentioned, oh my goodness, I've got so much work. This is a hobby, but on the same token, I'm not going to leave you just dry. unless there's something major that happens. There will be a video every Friday, and if that ever changes, I will of course let you know. But here's the thing about it. So if you've got a company, you're starting out, you're within your first 5 years, there's this definitive time frame where everybody's excited about it, and then it kind of lulls off, and then you start to not necessarily rebrand, but you find out actually where your niche is going to be, even though you might have had other intentions. And that's what's been happening with mine. I know where I want to head, I know what wants to be done, I know what my customers and clients expect of me, and that's great. That all ties into everything else. Now, the problem that I've had is that I had a couple major life-changing events a while back. Not necessarily this year, but last year. And you can kind of see it in the videos whenever it happened, because there was a video that I made, and you could see the confidence that I usually have. You could see the excitement of the book, the leaning forward, the setting back, you know, all these sorts of little things. And not to mention the amount of time I was putting into the edits, because I had things right where I needed them to be. And that was a great thing. Now, I might have mentioned this before, but what happened was me and my partner, we had been together for quite some time, and she had a difference of opinion of where we needed to be located, but we didn't have any infrastructure or backbone to be able to actually go to this place. If there had been an actual conversation, that would have been one thing. I was starting to not do the things that I wanted. I was spending all my time doing all these other things that had nothing to do with my business, had nothing to do with raising my family, and that was not a fun thing. That was not a good place to be. I like the simplicity of just me and you, and that's a beautiful thing, because as long as you want to tear me down, you do it respectfully, I'll listen. But, you know, trolls, we're not going to put up with that. You shouldn't have to, and I'm certainly not going to. There is an instance of somebody that did make a comment, and I featured it in a video because it was respectful. It was like, hey, you know, maybe you've got some bias here, maybe you've got this, and she called me out on it, and she was right. I addressed it, and we're going to move on. That's the way it's supposed to work. So the reason why I told you that part, what happened, I really didn't want to get into a whole lot of it beforehand, because it was a really rough time. It was a really hard thing to go through. It was not a depression type of a thing. It wasn't even an anger type of thing. It was more of a why type of a thing. With that to the side, I've had a struggle trying to keep up. So I've mentioned before I was going to hire somebody, and I'm bringing somebody on as a contract laborer. I'm hoping this is going to work out quite well. They have a history whenever it comes to podcast and video editing, photos, graphics, etc. That might filter into this a little bit. We'll see what happens there. I'm going to turn this person loose and we're going to see what happens. But that's going to aid me, because I'll be able to keep track of things better, and there's going to be a lot more organization that, as a single parent and a single owner business operator, I've not even had time. And that's okay, because sometimes that's what you got to do, you know. No big deal. So that's what's been going on. If things go the way that I want, you can pass through if you want. Oh, it's all right. And so, speaking of said person, there he was. Anyway, long of it all is this. We are going to hopefully get things together, announce some more things, and redouble the efforts, and come out of doing a lot more than what we were before. That's why I needed this other individual to help me out with these things, to make sure that phone calls get answered, to make sure that emails are responded to, or if something changes that I know about it, to help me keep things correlated and to help take some of that load off. What will we be covering? That's a question. I'm not sure what we're going to cover next week. It'll be a surprise. It's probably going to be a Ryk Brown book, probably the third one in that series. And if it's not that, surprise. And speaking of work, it's time for me to get to it. Today's book was Ryk Brown, The Rings of Haven. Like, share, subscribe. This is Shane with Shane's Books and Review, and I will see you in the next video.